When the door opened, the man raised the gun and fired, hitting an 8-year-old girl who had been excitedly running to greet him in the face. Hello there and welcome, I hope you're doing well. My name is Gabby and today's video is about a horrific multiple murder which took place on Christmas Eve in 2008. If you enjoy true crime, consider subscribing to the channel. This is the case of Bruce Pardo. At around 11:30 on Christmas Eve 2008, a man in a Santa costume walked up to the door of a house in a quiet cul-de-sac in Covina, California. Inside the house, a family party was in progress, as it was every year. So a man arriving there in a Santa costume would seemingly be nothing out of the ordinary. However, instead of gifts, this Santa was carrying a gift-wrapped homemade flamethrower in one hand and a semi-automatic handgun in the other, with 3 more guns about his person. When the door opened, the man raised the gun and fired, hitting an 8-year-old girl who had been excitedly running to greet him in the face, before indiscriminately opening fire as partygoers hid behind furniture and fled for any available exits, including windows. The man is then believed to have stood over and executed some of his victims, before unwrapping his flamethrower and using it to set the home ablaze. Meanwhile, the police received multiple 911 calls about shots fired from neighbours who saw the terrified partygoers fleeing the house, including a teenage boy screaming, "They shot my family." Having done what he'd come to do, the Santa suit clad shooter changed into his normal clothes, got back into his car and left. Emergency services arrived shortly after, although the firefighters were held back by police due to what sounded like continued gunfire from inside the 2-story house, but which in hindsight was likely discarded ammunition burning. In the meantime, the fire soared to over 40 to 50 feet, and when the firefighters were finally able to tackle it, it took 80 of them an hour and a half to extinguish the blaze. Afterwards, the charred remains of 9 victims were found in the burnt-out ruins of what was once a home. Given their condition, it was necessary to use dental and medical records to identify them. They were established to be the homeowners, 8-year-old Joseph Ortega and his 70-year-old wife Alicia, their sons Charles, aged 49, and James, aged 41. Charles's wife Cherie, aged 45, and James's wife Teresa, 42, along with Joseph and Alicia's daughters, one also named Alicia, aged 46, and another named Sylvia, aged 43. The final victim was the youngest, Alicia's 17-year-old son Michael. Of the 9, 3 had likely died from gunshot wounds alone, 4 from a combination of gunshot wounds and the fire, and the final 2 are believed to have died from the fire alone. The killer was Sylvia's recently divorced husband of 2 years, Bruce Pardo. The couple had married on 29th of January 2006 and moved into Bruce's home in Monrose, about 15 miles north of LA. Bruce worked as an electrical engineer, while Sylvia had a job at a flower breeding company in Elmont that made just over a quarter of what Bruce's job did. Sylvia had 3 children from a previous marriage. Initially, the marriage seemed to go well, but by December 2007 it had begun to fall apart, with Sylvia sleeping in another room and spending weekends at her parents'. 2 months later, she requested a divorce. In July 2008, Bruce lost his job and asked the court to grant him spousal support until he could find employment, as he had not received a severance package and had no income. Instead, he was ordered to pay Sylvia $1,785 a month in spousal support, plus $3,570 for past payments. These payments were waived when the divorce was finalised on the 18th of December, and he got the house, but he was ordered to pay his ex-wife $10,000 along with returning her wedding ring and giving her custody of their Akita, Saki. On the 22nd of December, he told his attorney that he was trying to get the money together. Instead, 2 days later, he put on a Santa costume, drove to the home of his former in-laws where he knew the annual Christmas Eve party was underway, and went on a killing spree. After he left the burning house, he got back into his rental car and drove approximately 30 miles to his brother's home in Sylmar, where he was later found dead from a single self-inflicted gunshot wound. His brother wasn't home at the time. It is believed that Bruce didn't initially intend to kill himself, based on the fact that he had $17,000 in cash cling-wrapped to his legs when he was found, and was later discovered to have bought an Air Canada ticket from LA to Moline, Illinois, where a high school friend of his lived. It is believed that his change of plans was due to him sustaining severe third-degree burns on his arms in the fire that he'd created, but he didn't die without trying to do even more damage. His rental car, which was found parked a block away from his brother's house, had been rigged in such a way that anyone moving parts of the Santa costume inside would ignite a flame and detonate a black powder-based explosive. The bomb squad was called, and they decided that the best way to deal with the IED in the car was to fire an incendiary device into it, destroying and burning both the IED and the car. In Bruce's home, the police found 5 empty boxes of ammunition for semi-automatic handguns, 2 shotguns, and a container for high-octane gasoline. To his neighbours, what had happened came as a shock, as Bruce had never seemed like someone who would be capable of doing what he did. One described him as being very nice and very sociable, while another had seen him in his yard a mere 2 hours before the shooting and said that he'd seemed normal and said, "Merry Christmas." With the killer dead, all that remained is for the living to try to come to terms with what had happened. In addition to the 9 fatalities, 3 people were injured in the attack. A 20-year-old woman who had broken her ankle jumping out of an upper-story window, a 16-year-old girl who was shot and wounded in the back, and the 8-year-old girl who was shot and wounded in the face, whose injuries, while non-life-threatening, meant she had a long road to recovery ahead of her. In addition to those physically wounded, those who survived the attack will undoubtedly have to deal with the trauma of what happened for the rest of their lives. A truly horrific event on a day that is usually full of excitement and anticipation for the following morning. Christmas for those who survived will unfortunately always carry traumatic memories. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget that I upload new videos every Monday and Friday. But until I see you again, please be safe, be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.